it seems after that 101 lecture, you got lots of emails asking you lots of questions, asking us lots of questions.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. So Akshay, we've been getting like steady flow of emails, I think, depending on which episode people have been watching on both emails and some DMs. And what I did was
They're
I spent the
they're
weekend.
sliding into your DMs.
Exactly, on QuamiCollab's DMs. But I mean, I love it because that's the whole point we are doing this. If people are not interacting and asking questions, there's no use of doing what we are doing at QuamiCollab, Akshay.
Definitely. Tell us, Aman, like the weirdest messages, questions you got, and tell me like the average questions you got, like the common questions.
No, weirdest are of course like, hi, follow us. Of course, everybody who's on Instagram. I somehow, whenever I'm bored, I also read a few of these bot kind of messages, or follow for follow, right? All that shit. They are the most interesting and weird ones. But on a serious note, actually, after reading that, there are like dozens of emails, and I realized that they fall into certain kind of buckets. So I made a quick chart. And of course, I realized that there are only 3 buckets, right? At a very high level. Everybody has a unique problem, but at a high level. So number 1 is people, because we have lots of people who are, watching us from Indian subcontinent, Middle East, some of the developing countries, and lots of them have financial issues. And we know this actually, right? What it means. It's difficult for some of the people to maybe in developed country to not understand, but these people do not have the financial means, but they have this inner calling. They are pursuing some kind of hobby even after all the fighting against all the odds in their lives. But they're saying, "Hey, boss, if I have these financial issues, what do I do? Because I'm helpless." And I think some of the guests, maybe should answer that question, because a lot of artists in the history, like we were also speaking, have fought all the odds, including poverty, financial issues, and stuff like that. Then the second one are people who are somewhere in middle, right? So either they have studied a little bit, they have done they are working in allied creative artistic fields like advertising, graphic designing, doing some gigs as a photographer or a painter. They're not highly successful. They're not doing what they really, really love. But right now they are asking that, I am at a juncture where I want to decide that whether I go for education to hone up my skills, or whether I continue in my career, right? So work versus art versus, that kind of thing. And third are people who have actually kind of decided that, in near future, they are going to apply to maybe like an art school. For that, they want to understand that how do they apply to the right kind of grants, exhibitions, scholarships, so that they are building their portfolio, so that they get a successful application later on in their life. So that's the 3 kind of buckets where questions are coming in, Akshay.
Well, Aman and I did share a basic toolkit with the 101 session the last time on like what is a portfolio, what is a resume. And we thought it could be fantastic if we also brought in more artists to share their opinions regarding what do they think is important. And for that, we have invited some stellar individuals. I'm going to take you through the list now. The first is Ilona. She is an Israeli artist now based in London. She works between sculpture and mixed media, and she's going to be coming on and sharing with us like what excites her or what does she look at in an artist portfolio. And I thought it would be really interesting because usually I come from a photo-based background, but we want somebody else to come in and tell us a little bit more about fine art. The next is Sarah. Sarah is going to be joining us from New York, and Sarah is like doing incredible work. She's going to be sharing with us again like some of her ideas about what does she enjoy in a portfolio and how does she develop it. So all interesting point of views coming from active agents working in the industry who will be sharing with us.
I think actually that's a very interesting bunch of experts, people, and I think this is what people need, right? Because they want to get really practical, human, emotional kind of understanding, kind of guidance, which they don't get from books or other resources online. So I think it's going to be really, really helpful for people.
Yeah, and we're going to be sharing all the links, all the references which they talk about, so that you guys can follow up on it later. But I think this is good. Like we can just kick it off. So let me introduce everyone to Sarah. Sarah is a documentary photographer, much more than a documentary photographer, but that's what her bio says. Based in New York City, she is from Minneapolis, and she's been working on ideas around youth in Russia, Eastern Europe, and United States. And out of her hundreds of awards, we have, I wanted to say that she also won the Alexa Foundation grant, the Eugene Smith Fellowship, and the World Press Photo. Like, bravo, bravo. Fantastic. And Sarah, I asked you about, now you've been doing this for some time. How has your journey been, like, into like this creative world? Because I know that you also studied a lot of literature and a lot of languages, and you've been dealing with both of them together.
Yeah, I mean, I study a lot in my own time, but I just think you have to have more than one art form informing what you're doing. And I think oftentimes we get really stuck in the one thing we think we're good at, and we forget to keep challenging and learning. So for me, it's really important to always study language and literature and whatever subject I'm interested in outside of photography, and let that also inform my work.
Yeah.
And my
Well, Aman is Sarah's learning. She knows Russian, is also learns Spanish, also learns French, I think. Right? And there's one more language. I think there's German. Yes, exactly.
Oh my God. I've been trying to learn Polish for all of my life and still.
Well, I also need to learn Danish, but obviously I am way too slow. I'm still on like learning words like cat, dog, water.
Same.
So
definitely. It's not an easy language, right?
Well, Sarah, I think nothing is easy language anymore now that we are so old. But anyways, what Sarah has for us is very kindly, she has prepared 5 great things, important things which she keeps in mind when looking at a portfolio or making her own portfolio. And Sarah, like, go for it.
Okay, 5 bullet point list of things to do or remember when you're either giving a review or having a review. And I'm basing these off of mistakes that I've made, things I've done really wrong when I go to reviews. I'm usually the person being reviewed. I've actually never been the reviewer outside of critiquing students in classrooms. So the context for what I'm saying is bringing your portfolio to a professional review from an editor, someone in a magazine, or someone in the industry. The first mistake I ever made was memorizing a pitch and giving the same pitch to every single person. I think that sometimes is the easiest way to do it. We like having the idea that we're very articulate, we know what we're doing, and just pressing rewind and repeat in our head. But the problem with that is that we're not adjusting it to the person that's in front of us. And I think my first review ever, I had this pitch about my work being based in documentary and politics. And I realized like halfway through the pitch, I was pitching to a food editor at the New York Times, and they were like, okay, thank you. And it ended 10 minutes early. And it was very embarrassing. And I realized I could have easily said, like, I haven't photographed still lifes or food, but you can see my lighting and the color that I use. It could easily be adjusted to what you do at the magazine. But I really didn't take into consideration who was sitting in front of me, and was kind of being a little bit arrogant. Like, if they want to work with me, they'll have to like my exact style and what I'm doing. So I would say, the first biggest piece of advice is to really know who's in front of you. And I know that's cliche, but it's super important.
No, Sarah, it's not cliche, because I think I've made that mistake way too many times. I was just thinking about that, and Aman has scolded me so many times. In fact, Aman and I were like in an advertising pitch, remember, for something, and we also were doing the same thing. We just like kind of forcing our idea there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's cliched, but I've learned this also the hard way, because this is what I do for a living. I make pitches every day, right? And now I know that I need to know the company, I need to know the context, I need to know every damn person in that room. So I do my homework all the time, and the pitches go much better than they used to go like 10 years before when I was starting off.
Exactly. It's even like you said, like knowing the people and what they've worked on. Like, I've also pitched a project where they're like, you obviously don't know me because I just did a project like this like 2 months ago, and I'm like, sorry. Yeah, so it's not just the person that like the field they're in, but like the work they've done and the kind of work they like to do. So I think that's super important. And
great point. Yeah. Okay.
And the next thing is also like a cliche sentence, but it's super true. It's just that less is always better. I think there's no time interview. It's so short and it goes by so fast that every single picture has to be really good. And it's better to have half the amount of images that are super strong than to do double that are just mediocre. it's really easy to lose someone's focus or interest if you're showing work that isn't your absolute best. And I think also in the setting of a review, every picture has to have some kind of interesting story behind it. Not just like, well, this is pretty lighting and this is a nice composition, but you have to be able to discuss it and talk about it. And because of that, I would say, yeah, less is always better. I think cutting it down and making it really concise and strong is better than having like a large, full portfolio.
Cool, makes sense. Definitely makes sense. And I think it's the same for any creative practice. We could say that just know what you're producing and bring in like the strongest set that you're willing to share. Fantastic, great point.
Yeah, I mean, have a friend or colleague look over your work and tell you like, this shit is bad or this is good. I think we're terrible critics of our own work. We tend to like the story behind what we do more than the pictures. So it's important to have someone outside of your personal connection to tell you, like, objectively, this is just an okay picture. Or this is fantastic. Yeah, so get a second set of eyes on it before too. That's always really helpful.
Okay.
And the next thing I think is super important is if you're showing multiple projects or multiple different like themes that you're working on, I think it's really important to emphasize the connection underneath them, or else it looks like you're just working on a random assortment of things and the person in front of you won't understand your artistic connection to it. So for example, if I'm working on a project in my hometown, in my high school or something, and a project in Russia in different schools or different programs, I would say something like, well, the underlying theme beneath this work is the fact that I'm really interested in identity amongst teenagers and adolescents, whether it's in this geographic region or over here or whatever. So I think trying to show that your body of work is unified by specific questions that you're asking, or motivated by some questions you have about the world. And that question runs the same throughout all these different projects. Will help your work to really seem more unified and consistent, rather than just someone who's picking out random subjects and things.
Well, that is a brilliant point. Brilliant point. Yeah, definitely.
And because, Sarah, this is what we do every day, because brands are importantly, in the choice I make as a brand to even like pick up an artist I work with, right? Or a commercial photographer, director, anybody, right? These days, from last many few years, we also look at like what is your underlying value, which is shown, like you were saying, underneath every work. What is that one question you're trying to answer? Because these days, even if your work is very great, like technically you've been doing a lot of commercial space, brands tend to not go with those guys. We always pick up guys who stick to their values and a fundamental question they have been doing, even though they're doing variety of work. So I think that's a very, very important point.
Well, even for artists, like to see the red thread of your study below everything, irrespective of anybody else, is always like, oh, this person has been studying this. Like Lauren Greenfield, I think, like has been studying something, or like somebody else studying something. Great, bravo. I love that.
Yeah, I think most of us do that. I think we're all drawn to certain themes continually. Sometimes it's hard to see that until you have to articulate it and talk about it. And that's why these reviews are really useful, not just for pitching your work, but for being able to understand that and then say it confidently and start seeing it too. I think reviews are as much as something that you do for yourself as for someone else. But yeah, I think it's super important. And again, it's not like you have to make up something. I think all artists generally have some thread that's connecting work. It's just being able to identify it and say it confidently is a harder thing to do.
Absolutely.
So the next thing I would say would be to not just show completed projects, but show works that are in progress. And I think oftentimes we want to show like a real polished, complete version that we can talk about with confidence. And we think that in progress work might, I don't know, seem a little bit less secure. But I think, the reason that as an artist that you go to these kinds of reviews isn't just to pitch something finished. I think people really like to collaborate with you. And instead of handing a finished product saying like, I did it, it's done, this is it can't be changed. It's always better to show something that's a little bit in the works and to ask for advice and to be willing to have someone offer their editorial perspective and insight. And I think that shows that you're open to collaboration. It also shows that you're currently working on things and not just showing projects from years ago. I think it's important to show things that are in progress for many reasons.
Well, great. So, well, you are on QuamiCollab, so we know that you're definitely up for collaboration. But thank you so much for coming on. There's so many interviews. by Sarah, with Sarah, on her website. We will be sharing the link to that. We'll also be sharing her Instagram. And I think, Sarah, you also teach sometimes?
Yeah, I teach a few classes a year.
Yeah, so if you're ever interested in learning more about her practice or like learning with her, please feel free to get in touch with her. But thank you so much for like those incredible points.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will end the recording here. So for those who are just joining us now, because it's not a television show, but maybe you fast forwarded our podcast, and here you are. Our second guest for today is Ilona. Ilona is, in my opinion, a multifaceted artist operating between performance, sculpture, and moving and still media. And today she's with us, and she's going to hopefully also talk about a little bit about her work, about her journey, and from there we'll be moving on to her 5 incredible points about what.
Welcome to QuamiCollab, Ilona. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Ilona, how has your journey been into the creative field till now with regard to learning and collaborating?
I never actually dreamt to be an artist. I was doing all sorts of stuff, and then in one point I found myself applying for art schools. I did 1 year in art school in Israel, and then I arrived in London and did my BA at Chelsea. And eventually I founded a place called Balcon, which is an artist-led space. It was we were 6 artists running the place together. It was our studio, so we were working there permanently. And we were also hosting exhibitions and events, and sometimes we also had some artists in residence that we hosted to work in our space and to use our facilities. So it was really, really a good experience, and kind of building a community of artists and also of people that living in the area of the place. So one of the most essential things for artists is to have their space for creation. And sometimes for some practices, it's almost impossible to do it at home. And then you just find yourself with some other expenses, which sometimes you can't just afford. So we were really lucky to have this very generous guy giving us the building for free. And once we had that, we felt like we can't just use it for our own purposes. We had to share this gift that we received with others. So yeah, sharing is caring.
Yeah, fascinating. And Ilona, if you could also talk about your piece of work, Welcome Barrier. I think it's very interesting.
Thank you. So Welcome Barrier is a work currently on view at Haifa Museum in north of Israel. It's one of the larger cities in Israel. I made this work thinking about physical space, but also mental space, and thinking how when we change our location, sometimes we also change like our mental situation, or like our conscience is in a different space when we change physical spaces, or sometimes not. But I was wondering about the relation of the two. So this is kind of what I was interested in when I was doing this.
It also reminds me of like portals, of sort. Like you enter into one place and suddenly you're transported to someplace else. An incredible work. If you'd like to read more about it, we have the link in our references. We'll be sharing that, and we'll also be sharing Ilona's website and her Instagram. So if you'd like to reach out to her regarding her work. But Ilona, with the same collaborative generosity, you have also agreed to share with us 5 points about like what makes a good portfolio. So go for it.
Yay. So I think that the first thing to keep in mind when doing a portfolio is the goal. You have to know what you're submitting to, what's the purpose of this, because the brief changes from one goal to another. So it's very important to read carefully through the brief and pay attention to the details, because, for example, when you apply for a bachelor's degree or a course, the expectations of you are very different than what you are expected to show when you're applying for an exhibition or a grant. Therefore, I think that choosing your images and your works carefully according to the brief, that's super important. Second one, I would say quality. First of all, I think it's very important for everyone, and also I forget to do it sometimes, but it's an important thing to document your work well. Ask a friend who has a good camera, or just make sure that you have good documentations of your work and that you choose to put in your portfolio the best quality of work that you feel that you produced. You want to show the best of your abilities. The third one is uniqueness. In every kind of thing that you do, like many other people do it, whether you're aware of it or not. But especially people who view portfolios, they see a lot of work. So even if you do landscape paintings, think of what makes your landscape paintings unique. What is it that you do differently and is special in your work? So that's something to think about, I think.
Would it be fair to say that when you're saying uniqueness, it means that, we just want to highlight the focus or area, the area of study for that individual, that artist? Is that what it means? Or like, how do we find that uniqueness?
I think that was actually my next point, which is cohesiveness. And again, this is also depends on the brief, because if you're just applying for art studies, so sometimes you want to show that you have a range of creative ideas. You want to show that you're also experimental. And then again, it's different from other purpose portfolios. But I think that in a more professional arena, you have to have this some sort of cohesiveness, of some sort of what you said, actually focus on what it is that you do to kind of frame your work in a way. Many applications also require an artist's statement. So that's an addition, that there is some sort of correlation between the things that you write about your work and the work itself, which I think is important. But the most important thing I think is personality. Show who you are. People are looking for people, I think. And your work communicates what you think and what you feel and what you do and what you're interested in. So it's important to kind of show who you are.
Yeah, you saved the best one for the last one, like climax.
Can I say something? I need to butt in here. It is. You sound like a dream person I want to work with, because if you have never considered, you should try branding and advertising. This is exactly. You're like a dream person. I love listening to you, because I keep, ask Akshay. This is how I speak, right? Because my everything, whenever we have a discussion, I always start off from a brief, right? Because I said that, I keep telling him briefs are different, the objectives are different, the target audiences are different, the people you're pitching to is different. I keep talking about this unique, the USP, or the way to differentiate yourself from the others. So I think it was amazing, and I think it's really, really important, because I work in commercial space, right? But with artists, with creative people. I think what you said is really important, and everybody who's listening in, I think a lot of insights here. It sounds simple, but if you follow these 5 points, you are going to get success in your life for sure. Thank you, Ilona. I loved it.
Ilona, thank you so much for giving us time to come on a Saturday morning, and just hang out with us. But I really appreciate all of your feedback, and obviously, please follow her on whatever social media channel that you prefer. But yeah, we're done.
time